I've sat on your side of the fence as a supplier for 7 years with a huge operation into the NHS throughout the whole of Scotland, England, Wales and Ireland. So I know the frustrations of trying to win business. I completely believe in the procurement process and the legalities around it, because it does protect you from people just not liking the look of you, or not liking your personality, or somebody said something miserable about your company. So it's well worth playing the game. You just need to know the rules, and you've heard so much today. I'm going to try and be a little bit more practical, and Zoe and I had a quick chat earlier on, and I said I've got to keep my professional hat on and not go back to being a supplier and tell you how to do your jobs and sell into local authorities or the NHS or whoever your customers are likely to be. National contracts, procurement category done by Procurement Scotland, they are for anything that is common across the NHS, education, local authorities, universities and colleges, central government, absolutely anywhere. So things like stationery, multifunction devices, printers, etc. You heard a mention earlier by the previous speaker about the temporary staff contracts as well, that kind of thing. We are a centre of excellence, as has been mentioned, for local authorities. So Scotland Excel, we put in category B. So ourselves, APUC or APUC and National Services for the NHS all put their own contracts in place. They all have a centre of excellence. That's what we do. So we put contracts in place for very different things. Just as an example, the educational requirements for schools in your local authorities are completely different to colleges and universities. So we wouldn't necessarily put one contract across the piece for any of those requirements. They would be kept separate, because the type of suppliers could be completely different as well. The same with furniture. Furniture that we would require for schools and local authorities, buildings and requirements, the town hall and clerk manager, wherever, would be possibly completely different to what APUC would need or what the NHS would require. Cat Cs and Cat C1s, we are a lot more heavily involved in those now. We have regional forum groups for the local authorities. Zoe holds two within the regions of Inverness and Aberdeen. I do them for Paisley and the Edinburgh side, and we're looking at spend which doesn't necessarily need to be a national contract, but it can be regional. So again, it gives you a much better opportunity to try and tap into some of that spend on a very fair and level playing field. So it might be where a local authority could go out to just 3 quotes and choose the most competitive that way, and you might never hear about it if you've not picked it up on the grapevine, or it could be something much bigger if we pull it together, in which case we would tender that out through Public Contract Scotland, so you would actually see it. So it pulls spend much more into the public eye. So that bit of the collaboration I definitely believe in, and I find it certainly a lot more beneficial than my previous job role. So local councils would put their own CATCs in place. We would look at telling, like say Julie here, who's going to talk to you next from East Lothian, we would put that group together and say, well, you're all spending this amount of money on this particular area, do you want to do something together and try and get good value for it and streamline exactly what you're doing, and then that would go straight out into the public domain. Okay. Geographic and product lotting. Zoe mentioned earlier about that butcher meat and milk were awarded geographically due to the nature of the market. That's because your butcher up in Aberdeen isn't going to service East Lothian and vice versa. We also do product lotting as well for very particular reasons. Again, it just depends. It depends on the complexity. There's no point in us putting a whole raft of products out on one list if some suppliers couldn't supply all of that and they maybe have a niche market. The one that comes to mind is PPE, protective equipment and clothing. Our current PPE contract actually has specific lots for workwear, because there are some suppliers who can supply workwear but they wouldn't supply footwear. They would only actually supply the clothing, or they wouldn't supply air masks and other equipment like that. So we do selectively lot it where we know the supply base isn't across the piece. Okay. And we would encourage consortia bids. It's not something that I've really found happening. Certainly not in my nearly 3 years with Scotland Excel. It doesn't happen that often at all, and there's none really spring to mind. So you need to use all the information that you've got today to look at whether that's appropriate or not. And again, understand the supply chain. I've got a huge paragraph here. Who's your customer and how do they purchase? And I've found it really frustrating the last couple of years because so few companies know exactly how a local authority purchases. They just know that they buy the products that they have to sell, but they don't know who actually buys them, how they physically do that. Do they make a phone call, send a fax? Are they going to put an electronic order through? And they then look to tender for business, and D-Day comes along, and all of a sudden suppliers aren't able to produce the appropriate information to go into electronic systems to create catalogues. And we finish up with situations where a contract can be a month old and nobody's received any orders yet because the suppliers haven't given us the catalogues to give to the councils to load up into their systems. So it's back to when you're going to tender, make sure you've opened the documents as soon as they're available, you read them and you understand exactly what you're going to have to provide and start preparing for that, because it's a lost opportunity. So if you snooze, you lose. Be smart, be ready and be prepared, so if you do get awarded onto a contract or a framework, that you're ready to roll and scoop up the business, because if somebody else hasn't been as well prepared, there's an opportunity there for you as well to be first off the starter block. Okay. How will you know? You've been told already, Public Contract Scotland. They're all on there. If they're over the EU threshold, they should be on there. You shouldn't have to look anywhere else. What I would say is make sure that you're registered appropriately, that you're categorised correctly. There's no point in looking for PPE I mentioned. I'll just use the same example. Looking for PPE contracts across local authorities or for our national one. If you're down as a plant hire supplier, you won't get the alerts for it. You just won't see it unless you go on there every day and scroll down every notice that's been published. So just again, be very careful how you're categorised.